Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. Today, we're going to focus on how you, the leader, can navigate your business during epic times. We're going to be listening to thoughts and strategies from David Chavez, who is our CEO and founder of Assured Strategy. We are a business consulting firm really helping senior leaders in navigating the strategy, execution, people, and cash decisions necessary to grow and scale their business. My name is Kane Petkovich, and I am the COO and business partner of David, as well as one of the leadership coaches here at Assured Strategy. The information that I'll be sharing is really focusing on learning about your employee, how they're handling stress, the common reactions to stress, the different fears that might be coming up. We'll also be talking today about how to navigate transitioning into a virtual work environment, as well as things to keep in mind when you're thinking about your strategy, execution, and cash in the context of this ever-changing environment. With us today, we also have Ted Sarvata, who is a 25-year experienced strategy coach in our firm. We have Ishmael Ramos, who also has experience as a prior business owner and strategy coach. And we will be listening to Cindy Klingler, who is focusing on process and execution efficiency when she discusses the common areas of waste in our operations. Cindy is a black belt in Six Sigma and lean concepts. So we're looking forward to her content today. Thank you for being with us. We will make this video available online for those who cannot attend. And so let's get started. David.
Walking you through this. And so really this thing is about navigating your business in this epic time that we're in. It's really something that we've really never seen before. And right now, everyone's just really confused. I can honestly say I'm really confused too. I feel most of the time things are out of control. I have no way of even controlling half of the things are going on. And you know, most of us, we like to control what's going on. But I can't even really give a sense of direction to everyone as well as I would like to because of everything that's going on. So what we can do is really focus in on some of the things we already probably know. I know a lot of our clients are on, and I want to remind you the importance of really honing in on your core values. Your core values are your real guide during this time. I can't stress how important your core values are to you keeping them in front of yourself and in front of your team. And so when we're thinking about core values, remember there are a handful of rules. It shouldn't be more than 5 because our people just can't remember. Usually 3 is the best, but 5 is probably the upper limit where they can actually start to remember them. And they remain constant over the years. These core values define who we are as leaders in the organization, and it defines the organization and what we're trying to accomplish. So keep in mind, there's 3 tests to your core values. Number 1, I'd fire an offender. Okay, that one we're not going to spend a lot of time on, but the next one I really want to spend some time on. I would take a financial hit. In other words, to make sure I'm living my core values, I would take a financial hit, and take that hit in this time of the coronavirus may be one of these times when we actually have to take a financial hit in our company. But the key is to keep the core values in front of us as we're making decisions. The next one is the alive among the people today. Alive among the people today means everyone knows them and they're practicing them. It's really important to think about alive among the people today because I want to keep them in front of our people as they start to work from home and we're not as closely connected to them as we normally are, that these core values still define us and we're still using them to make decisions even with our customers. Okay? Then the next thing is the core purpose. These 2 things together, core values and core purpose, are what Jim Collins calls core ideologies that's come from the book Built to Last by Jim Collins and Jerry Porras. And these 2 items are the essential thing of the belief and what the behavior inside of the company. So what is your purpose? Why are you here? The team we're here with, it's improving the quality of life. Improving the quality of life in the time we're in right now is a very challenging purpose. but at the same time, they keep it at the forefront of all their decisions. As we started our retreat yesterday, we started off with what are the core values? What's the purpose? And we started it with those two things to remind us of how to act and behave and what to believe and what we're going after, what we're doing to change the world. Okay. So now Kane's going to talk a little bit about the common reactions to fear.
All right, so many of our employees, including ourselves and us as business leaders, we're having a state of a reaction to an acute situation, which is bringing up 3 different common reactions to fear, which is fight, flight, and freeze. So I want to talk about what the symptoms of each of these look like, because we need to normalize these behaviors amongst ourselves, with our executive teams or closer leadership teams, as well as amongst our employees, to understand that no reaction is right or wrong, but the types of things we're seeing, this is why we're seeing it. So some of the specifics in terms of fight, when someone is wanting to take action, that's really what the fight response is about. So many of us have gone out shopping, we're having hoarding behaviors, we're looking at sometimes overreacting to different types of situations. Sometimes we are making quick decisions about what's happening around us. We're not really slowing down and thinking about things the way that we used to. Again, very action oriented. The next one is we are thinking about contingency plans. What would I do if this case scenario or that case scenario? And our minds are going in terms of preparing for different options. Sometimes our minds in an action place are going to worst case scenario. How can I protect myself and prepare for something that might be worst case? So sometimes people have this restless feeling where they can't sit still, but they can't focus either. So they're going out and doing something. So the fight response in this situation, what you might see within yourself is a lot of action-oriented behaviors. The next area is flight. So many of us are in flight responses as well. So some of those include, I'm really not going to do anything right now. It's not that bad. They're just basically minimizing a little bit about what might be happening around them. They're trying to take things in stride. They might be rationalizing a lot of what's happening as a way to make sense and to calm their anxiety. Sometimes people are saying things like, I'll take it as it comes. I'm not really going to think about worst case scenario. I'm just going to slowly go with whatever is presented in front of me in the moment. Sometimes they might underreact because instead of actually having an action, they might pull away from the situation and have an underreaction. Or sometimes I'm hearing different employees or leaders say, well, everyone's in the same boat. So we're all in it together. We'll just go through this together. And then others really don't know what to do specifically. And so basically they're just sitting back and they're having withdrawal type actions. The third,
Kane,
yeah,
this morning on the radio, it was sort of funny because I'll take it as it comes. They were asking people to call in and talk about how people are reacting to this. And this lady got on the air and she said, yeah, my husband, he didn't take it seriously till they closed the bar down the street. So his flight was what he finally came to reality once the bar was closed down the street. So he was in flight mode. And now that the reality sunk in, then he started preparing. So he got into fight mode after that. So just really interesting.
Yeah. It's just basically our coping mechanisms. It's how we're coping with acute stress. So the third type of behavior you might notice in your employees or in yourself or other leaders is freeze state. Okay, freeze is non-action. So that looks like things regarding being overwhelmed, not really knowing what to do, okay? Being paralyzed in fear. Decisions seem to be really hard. There's so much going on in your mind that you really don't feel comfortable making decisions, and small decisions seem really large. You might also have a sense of dread, where you're basically thinking the worst might be happening, but you don't really know what. So you have this feeling of impending doom. That's another experience of freeze state. A third might be moving more into victimization type mentality, poor me, something's happening to me. And we're going to spend some time later in this webinar talking about that specifically and how leaders can address employees who are in more of a victim mentality around all this. So stay tuned for that information. And another example of freeze might be, I'm just going to sit tight and wait, and I'm not really going to do anything. So again, the intention of sharing this with you is to make sure you understand that all reactions are normal. They're survival mechanisms that we all have. And as a leadership team, we need to make sure that we're talking about our reactions so that we can support each other, because one reaction is not better or worse than another. But as a team, as a collective, we can bring more rational minds. Because what happens when we're in a state of crisis is that our frontal lobe shuts down, and it's harder for us to think rationally because we're in the reptilian part of our brain, which is in survival mode. And so as a collective group, we really have to support each other and be able to listen to each other's fears and normalize some of this reaction.
Yeah, Kate, we were talking about this the other day, and as we were putting these slides together, we were talking about how we've been dealing with this even in our own firm, watching the behavior of our own team, and even some of our own behavior and what modes we're in right now. We both realized we were in the fight mode as we were putting these together. And it really helped us when we got consciousness of really what mode we were in at the time and some of our behaviors that are actually taking place at that time. And I think it's really important for leaders that when you're helping the people that are around you, really to understand how you understanding whether they're in fight, flight, or freeze mode helps you deal better with them too.
Correct. So I'm just curious, those who are attending, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you have an option to raise your hand. So if you scroll at the bottom of the control panel, if you can just raise your hand and let us know if this sounds familiar to yourself or others that you see around you, I'd be curious to know how this is resonating with the group. So just raise your hand if some of this information you're seeing around you with your loved ones, your family, yourself, your colleagues, your employees. Yeah, quite a few hands are going up. All right, thanks, David.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, so let's keep on going here. So the next slide would be, what is the vital differential capability of the human brain? Now, some of you have seen me speak on some of these topics before. You know that the answer to this is pattern recognition. Pattern recognition is the thing that really is the vital differential capability of the human brain, but we call it habits. So what are our daily habits? All of us have been taken out of our daily habits, and let me show you how important this pattern recognition is. I'll give you a second to take a look at this. So most of you are probably reading this and you're saying, this message serves to prove how our minds can do amazing things, impressive things. In the beginning, it was hard, but now you're on this line, your mind is reading it automatically without even thinking about it. Be proud. Only certain people can read this. Well, only certain people can read it, but it's that pattern recognition that's allowing to read. 5M3554G3. I'm not reading message. And what I'm showing these slides is to help you understand that all of us have been taken out of our patterns. All of our patterns have been disrupted. And because our patterns are disrupted, this is disrupting the way we're thinking and approaching things. And it's really important that we understand that we're taken out of our patterns and it's causing our behavior to not be as it normally would be. So we're relating this to the people that have DISC out there. We help a lot of people with an advanced insights tool. And what we really want to do is we want to talk a little bit about DISC. Kane's going to talk a little bit about it too. But what I really want to point out is now is the time when I need to get back out the DISC of my teams and start to look at the DISC and start to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. Because where some people may show up in an adaptive mode at work, Right now, they may be more in their natural state. And if you remember, the gray scale is the adaptive mode, and the colored scale is your natural mode. So you may see a higher D showing up in somebody who has a little bit lower D. You may see a lot of talkativeness in somebody who's a little bit quiet every once in a while. So we're just trying to make sure we point this out. And I know you had a few comments around this, Kane.
Yeah, I'm just curious with another show of hands of the attendees. Can you raise your hand again if you have a disc and are familiar with disc? I'm just curious how many people on the call have an understanding of this piece in terms of what I'm going to go over. Yep. So just keep raising your hand if you're familiar with this. If you've never heard of disc,
that's over half of them have that, so that's pretty impressive. So that's great,
yeah.
actually.
So if you're not familiar with DISC, it's a behavior pattern tool that allows an employee to gain awareness of how they show up when they're in their own natural state and comfortable in their environment, as well as their behavior patterns when they feel eyes are on them, or they're being more observed, or they're not sure if their natural style is what's called for or not. And I'm using this particular graph as an example of a manager who I worked with. So this is someone's profile. Because when he was in a natural state, he was very outgoing and talkative. That's the I dimension, that's interactive, okay? But when he was under mild stress or moderate stress, he would isolate, adapt way down, go into his office, close his door, and not talk to his employees. And his employees would then come back and say, well, what's going on with this person? Why aren't they interacting like they normally do? However, now, in a state of crisis, he doesn't have time to be thinking about his behavior. He's going to go back into his natural state, most likely, because you flip into what's most comfortable for you when you're really under high intense pressure and stress, because you don't have time to worry about how you're showing up. So I would expect him to be much more talkative, finding out what's going on, engaging with others, being out there in front of his employees. So if you have one of these profiles, or your employees have them, it's really important to understand that some of the behaviors you're used to seeing in the workplace that might be some adaptive behaviors in that kind of environment at times, they might be switching into their natural, and those swings are going to become very relevant. So if you have this, please use it during this time. It'll be really important. And if you don't, this is a service that we offer, and we can do telephonic DISC reports and telephonic group sessions and debriefs. So if you don't have access to this, you can always reach out at the end and we can give you this information. But as a leadership,
Kane, just to throw in here, at the end of this, we're going to give people access to get free DISC profiles. So we have to still do a debrief for you, but at the same time, if you want a DISC profile and you haven't had one, we'll give you that opportunity at the very end.
Yeah, that'd be great. I highly recommend everyone on the call take advantage of that. Normally that's several $100 value. And right now in this state of crisis, knowing yourself and your behavior patterns could really be helpful to you as a leader. So that's great, David.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the effects of long-term acute stress. And I'm going to turn this to Kane because she's sort of our expert in this. So.
Yeah, so team, the reason I wanted to bring this information on behalf of Assured Strategy to everyone is because we're going into unknown times where we are going to be in a state of higher stress because our world is interrupted, and we are going to want to get back to a new norm. And the longer that this situation continues, which none of us, have the ability to control that, you're going to start to notice within yourself, your fellow leaders, and your employees or your family members that this is going to begin to take a toll. And I want to give you the warning signs of this so you can begin to see it and normalize it and talk about it. Because oftentimes people have shame in talking about some of the personal things going on because they don't want to be seen as weak or vulnerable or not competent. Okay, so it's really important that as leaders, you all understand what to look for. So behaviorally.
Kane, I think it's really important, though, that I want to emphasize the thing that you said, that sometimes we think that these things aren't, and I want to go back to this, that the long-term acute stress, all of us are going to feel it. because we're all out of our patterns. And I want to tie this back to the patterns again and why I showed that slide. We're all out of our patterns, and that's going to cause everyone a little bit of stress. The lower the S you are in your DISC, the easier it is for you. But if you're a higher S, right now, it's going to be stressful because you're out of your patterns quite a bit. And so I'll let Kane get back into the behavior portion of this.
So some of the things that you want to be looking for is a change in your activity level. So some people might notice that they're becoming more manic with their behaviors, meaning more active. They're more restless. They're doing more things physically, while others might be more stationary than normal, not being as active as normal. And especially when we're working from home or we're working remotely, there's going to be a disruption in behaviors in general in terms of activity. So people should be aware if someone's doing a lot extra than normal or they're pulling back from normal. The next is substance use. And I throw this in because all of us are going to have coping mechanisms, some healthy, some unhealthy. And people are going to probably start to use more substances to medicate, self-medicate some of that anxiety. The other thing that's going to happen is a decreased ability to relax. So you could be sitting on the couch watching television, but you're not feeling relaxed. You could be talking to friends and you're still feeling anxious. You could be meditating and notice that you're not able to focus. So you're going to notice that you might have a decreased ability to relax. And also, job performance is likely going to be affected because it's harder for you to focus and make decisions, which we'll get to in a little bit. But sometimes just that ability to rationalize things and do your normal tasks, they might become harder. Some of the physical things that might begin to happen to people is that you're going to notice an increase potentially in aches and pains because we somaticize our emotions into our body. So what that means is that sometimes our mental state comes and gets manifested in our body with neck pains or shoulder pains. And so if you notice that your body is just physically aching more, it could be because of your emotional stress. Headaches will probably be on the rise, as well as weight changes, either weight gain or weight loss. So it really doesn't matter if it's up or down, but if you're noticing a change in your body's metabolism or your eating patterns, that could be affected. Your digestive system could be affected, as well as sleep. So having a harder time falling asleep, harder time staying asleep, waking up earlier than normal, or wanting to sleep more than normal. So these are some of the physical things that might happen under long-term acute stress.
And I wanted to jump in here a little bit because, like, look, if the virus itself isn't keeping us indoors, it's probably good if you can to get outside a little bit every day, just to make sure you're keeping some physical activity during this time. It's probably really important to you all the way around. Next one, emotional.
Yeah, so this is something that we really need to pay attention to with our employees, because we have to show increased grace right now, because this is going to start to affect team relationships. So highs and lows, what you'll notice is that your employees might they'll be more emotional. So their highs are higher and their lows are lower. You might notice an increase in irritability, crankiness, frustration. Anxiety might be increasing, which means like some of the stomach is going on or the chest palpitations. So there might be just a general increase of anxiety symptoms in general. Depression symptoms, I'm actually really concerned about a potential increase in suicides during this time, because often when people feel hopeless and helpless, then that is a correlation. So make sure you're paying attention to these things in your employees and make it okay to talk about. Guilt. This is also something that sometimes happens, whereas I'm not affected, but someone else is. I feel guilty. Sometimes it's called survivor guilt. So people might start to feel guilty about their circumstances compared to others. The next one is apathy. So after you care about something for so long, you become a little bit more numb to it. And so that apathetic approach to something might set in, and it's normal. So we don't want to ostracize someone who just seems to be not really engaged as much as they used to be about caring about something. And then grief. So many of us might go through stages of grief. There's a lot out there on the internet about the stages of grief. But as we go through this, you might notice some more symptomology in that area as well. All right, the next area is going to probably affect employees will be their mental processing, so thinking type skills. Memory might be affected over the long term. People might be forgetting more things than normal. They might be confused about the simple stuff. So where someone used to get something really quickly, now it takes them a little longer to hear it and process it because they have to put that in the context of all the other stuff that they're managing in their mind. So that might be coming across as being slower to think about something. They're just not as quick as they used to be. Sometimes it might affect an employee's ability to prioritize, or even our own. We feel paralyzed because there's so many priorities, we don't know where to start. And so again, that frontal lobe, normal cognitive thinking begins to get slowed down. That also might make it hard to make decisions. So you might notice really quick decisions that are not well thought through, or really slow decisions because people feel more paralyzed. So pay attention to that. And then losing objectivity, right? As we go into a new norm, it's going to be sometimes employees might lose objectivity and catastrophize, or think that the sky's falling, or conversely that there is no problem, minimizing. So sometimes the mental mind switches in some of its pattern against the norm as survival mechanisms.
Yeah, I want to jump in here and just remember that I want to remind, especially the clients that we work with on a regular basis, you've probably seen this before, the levels of change. And so at first I'm basically excited about the change. Then the reality starts to set in of the change. And then we start to adapt and get better at the change. And then the change becomes part of the norm. So you have to realize that you're going to go through that euphoric stage where everybody's like, oh, maybe I get to stay at home. I get to be at home and I get to be with my kids. And now the reality is that the challenge of staying at home, and that shift probably happened really quick. There's maybe a little bit of like, oh, I get to stay at home. And then probably a few hours later, I could have already been in the second stage, which is a little bit of gloom and doom of like, oh my gosh, I got to stay at home. How am I going to stay involved in work? And so all these things, when Kane was talking about confusion, slow to think, things like that, because we have all these things in our mind, it may slow us down. Thanks, Kane. I'm going to move on to the next one, social.
Yeah. And social. So these are some of the things that might be happening with teams who are used to working together, or as executive team dynamics. You might begin to see some more isolation. You might begin to see some more blaming conversations where people are quick to point the finger. It's part of the reaction to stress. They also might be challenged with asking for help. Because again, I'll reiterate, they don't want to seem vulnerable. They don't want to seem weak. I just had this conversation with an executive today where they didn't want to share how they were handling the stress because they were having a large reaction. They were upset and they didn't want to be perceived as weak and not a good leader. So it's really important that people make it okay and normalize these behaviors. It's okay to ask for help and let people know what's going on. And the last is blahs. That's a low-level word for anhedonia, which basically means a loss of interest and pleasure in normal activities. So it's not quite depression, but it's not norm. It's not the normal state you're in. So it's called anhedonia. It's just having the blahs. So as we begin to get into some of the challenges of converting into a virtual workplace, which we have a lot of information on that's going to come up, I want you to keep in mind that we're going to discuss strategies of how to keep your virtual teams engaged so that some of these behaviors will be mitigated, okay? So before we jump to the next section, which we're gonna move into cash now, could you just do another raise of hand if any of these behaviors of acute stress, if these resonate with you? Have you begun to see them? Does this sound like something that you're noticing in your world? I just would like to get a pulse on our attendees here. All right, and we will make this deck available. So if you would like to get this deck afterwards to be able to have those behaviors listed out, we're happy to share that because we're probably going to see it as we go into the future over the next few weeks.
Most definitely. All right, so the next I want to talk a little bit about cash because cash is definitely an issue in most of the companies out there. So we're going from the people stage, moving into the cash stage, because we want to cover the 4 decisions that are inside of the Scaling Up book. And so the second one we're covering is cash. I want to go back to the cash conversion cycle, or cash acceleration strategies is the new term that we use in the Scaling Up system. But the cash conversion cycle is how long does it take me to spend $1 to get the dollar back? And in that, we have 4 different cycles. We have the sales cycle, the make and production inventory cycle, the delivery cycle, and the billing payment cycle. So the question is in the cash conversion cycle, we have to think about shortening cycle times. Now, our cycle times may have increased quite a bit since we're working at home, and then some of the rules of distancing and everything else that we're dealing with, our cycle times may have gotten longer. And so what I want to start to think about and get our teams to think about, our team members to actually think about, is how do we shorten these cycle times over time? Now, because all of these processes are new, we're going to talk a little bit about processes and what you need to be doing with your processes in this new environment. But we'll want to think about how to shorten these cycle times. How do I get through the sales cycle a little faster? How do I get through the make and inventory cycle? I almost think the sales cycle is almost dead right now for a little while. There's still some sales activity going on out there. We've had a lot of sales activity going on. And so it still does exist, but how do I start to shorten it? Because it's a little more challenging to sell right now. Make and production and inventory cycle, what is that? It's going to speed that up. The delivery cycle, the billing and payment cycle. How do I speed up and shorten those cycle times? The next thing is I have to start eliminating mistakes. Right now, there's probably a lot of mistakes going on because the processes have all shifted. No one really even knows the processes. The processes that worked in our office or in our manufacturing facility or even in the company that we delivering products from, it's different now. How do we get and discover those mistakes we keep on making over and over? And that's in the Rockefeller Habits Checklist, which we'll go over in a little while. It's in number 5 and number 6. What is hassling my employees and what is hassling my customer? So how do I figure out what's hassling my employees? Because usually it's mistakes that are hassling them. And then what is hassling my customers? Mistakes has a lot to do with what's hassling your customers also. So think about it from that frame. And then the last one is to improve your business model. As we're shifting, our models may change a little bit because of being away from our place of business, or a considerable amount of us being away from our business. So how do I improve my business model under the new methodology I'm using? So again, some of these same tools we use on a regular basis, and especially a lot of you out there, because I see quite a few of you are clients out there. So how do we use these tools that we've already learned to handle this situation we're in right now? So I want to talk about some other things that's really important for you to think about. First of all, think about your bank. When I think about my bank, is my bank staying open? I actually emailed my bank today and asked them if they're staying open. My banker replied back to me and said, we sure are. We only have our drive-through available. If for some reason you need to come into a branch, we just ask that you make an appointment so that we have social distancing that everybody's asking for. So think about your bank. Ask your bank how they're handling this crisis that we're in right now and how that's affecting you. Think about your loans and lines of credit. I want you to think about that the banks cut off all the lines of credit last time we started slipping into a recession. What happens if my line of credit gets cut off? I want you to think about that. How do I handle loan payments? Things like that. It's really good to communicate it before you start to have a problem. I think what Kane just went over, there's a lot of freeze going on there. So if you have a lot of freeze, you're not going to see some of these things. So I guess I'm breaking up really badly what I'm told, and I apologize about that. I'll just keep on going unless for some reason one of my team tells me that it's just I'm not coming through well enough at all. So loans and credit lines, I really want to take a look at those and really think about what's next for those. And then other cash ideas. I think one of the greatest things is that scaling up. Vern Harnish has been fairly active out there, and he gave us this sheet that he put out, and we can send this to you too. You can also get on the Scaling Up website and download it. But there's 5 things on here. The 4th one is cash, cash, cash. And I love what he says here. He says, go through your credit card statements and look at all your reoccurring expenses and see if you still need them. And see if they're absolutely important. He talks a little bit about one of his guys finding about $40,000 a month, which is about $500,000 a year in savings just from doing this exercise. So you want to think about that. The other thing that you really want to think about is Vern did expose to us that Amir Kassar is doing webinars on SBA loans. There's another webinar at noon tomorrow Eastern time, so that's 9 a.m. Pacific time, noon Eastern time, that's going to be being offered. And this guy has spoke to us at the Scaling Up Summits in the past, and I'm telling you that he is really knowledgeable about this subject. If you can jump on that webinar and learn a little bit about SBA loans, that may really help you a lot during this troubling time. So I strongly suggest that as another cash idea. There's a tremendous amount of other ideas that I have for cash. I'd probably like to talk to you one-on-one about some of those other ideas as you see fit. If you want to have a conversation about cash and some of the other things that you need to do, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to have that conversation with you. So to switch gears a little bit back to people, I want you to think about this because this also affects how we run our companies too. So the team we were with today and yesterday, we went through the FACE, the functional accountability chart, and we started looking at each of the leaders. What happens if this leader becomes ill? Or what happens if something really drastic happens and we lose them? Who's next in line, and how is that going to work? So again, it's a very daunting, difficult conversation. It sucks your energy and life out of you while you're having this conversation. I'm not going to try to make it sound like this is easy to do, but the team that did it yesterday with us, as we went through this, they said after we finish this exercise, I feel so much better just knowing what we're going to do and not having to make these decisions when we're in crisis mode. And so plan this in advance. Go through your functional accountability in your company and really think about who's going to be leading if the leader becomes ill and is out for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, or worse yet, something really devastating happens and we lose them altogether. The next thing is A, B, and C players. So I've had a lot of conversations with people about laying people off. And when I think about laying people off, it's never easy, but it's going to be a reality with some of the companies out there that I have to do this even to protect the employee themselves. I know some of the leaders I'm working with, they're laying people off so they can go collect unemployment so they get something because they're not even sure they can pay them anything. And when I start to think about this, I want to go with C players or BC players first. I want to start laying those people off first. I want to try to retain my A players. So those of you who have your employees ranked, I would probably start to go through that and figure out, because A players are going to give me twice the value as a C player. So maybe it's time for us to move away from the C players and go ahead and lay them off. Not saying they may be gone forever, but it may be a good time to clean them up. And then I want to make sure really that I'm keeping my A players until I just cannot go any further. Okay, so really spend some time thinking about who are my A, B, or C players. And again, if you want either of these 2 tools, just email us and we'll be happy to share these tools with you. And if you need a little help understanding how to use them, schedule a time with one of us. We have several coaches. There's 10 in our firm altogether, and we'll be happy to share insights of how these forms work. Next thing I want to talk about is the Stockdale paradox. The Stockdale paradox is from the book Good to Great. Those of you who have read this book, most widely read business book in American business, and why I wanted to bring up the Stockdale paradox is because I want you to understand what the paradox really is. And James Stockdale, who's over here on the left, was locked up for 7 years in the Hanoi Hilton during the Vietnam War. And what happened is he became very well known for saving a lot of prisoners' lives because he didn't become too euphoric about the end. In other words, he was optimistic about that they would get out, but he never shared the actual date. And you must think about this and think about this in the way that he thought about it. And here's some of the things that he thought about. You must never confuse faith with prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose that you're going to prevail in this in the end, with the discipline to confront the brutal facts that are before us. We don't know when this is going to end. I see some leaders out there telling their people, oh, this will be over in a few weeks. We don't really know that. It's actually in China. China is just now coming back online, and it's been about 3 months now. And so we really need to think about this in a little bit different way. And so he says to have the discipline to confront the brutal facts, but keep your optimism alive. You will overcome this in the end. And so I always want to hope for the best, but acknowledge and prepare for the worst is what the Stockdale paradox is really all about. And Jim Collins calls it having discipline to have the brutal facts on right now. Yesterday on our retreat with our client, all we did is going on. Trouble on my internet side, but all we did is deal with the brutal facts of what is going on. And a reporter, when he was released from the Hanoi Hilton, asked James Stockdale a question. He asked him, what happened to the optimist? And he said, oh, those were the ones who said we're going to be out of here by Christmas, Easter, some other date, and they kept on pushing the dates out there. After they kept on pushing the dates out there, he said they all died of a broken heart. And so what we don't want to do is set these dates, these false dates of when this is going to end, because none of us know when it's really going to end. And we have to deal with the brutal facts, but we have to remain optimists that we will win this fight. And Kane, I know you had some things you wanted to share around this.
Yeah, so I want to talk about what is likely going to happen as it relates to employees beginning to feel victimized by the situation or beginning to feel a loss of hope or a loss of control in their world, because the KARPMAN drama triangle is probably going to become alive and well in many of our companies. And we also might find ourselves sitting here on some of this. So I want to give leaders a way to see it and talk about it. We're normalizing it, but we're asking leaders to address it directly and give language to it. So the first thing that we might find is that employees begin to feel like a victim in some capacity, okay? And then what's going to happen is they're going to blame something external. So external blame could be their employer. It could be their boss or their supervisor. It could be the government. It could be the virus. It could be their state. But what happens is that a victim mentality, or when someone's feeling helpless or hopeless, is that they begin to think that something's happening to me, and they have to direct that against somebody else or something else. So after we have the persecutor role, then what happens is a victim wants to go and find a rescuer to help make them feel better. So if you're blaming the government or the virus or something, then you could go to your employer expecting them to rescue you. Or you could go to your supervisor expecting them to rescue you, or wanting the government to rescue you. So it's not about necessarily an individual person, but the victim triangle is this mode of someone feeling helpless, hopeless, like they don't have power and control, pointing the finger externally, and then finding or wanting to be rescued or saved from something else. That's called the victim triangle. What we want to help employees understand is that they, even though they don't have the ability to control everything going on around them, they do have the ability to control their reaction to the situation, right? So 7 Habits, it talks about this a lot, that it's internal or external locus of control. Do I own my universe? Do I have a sense of creating my universe? Or do I have an external sense, meaning that my universe is created outside of myself and I'm not in control of that? So we want to make sure that we're reminding employees that if you're feeling something's happening to you, no, you do have some choice in how you react, and thinking about what you can control versus just focusing on the things that you can't control. So having a mind shift here is really important. And then if they're coming to their leader or someone else, the persecutor dynamic, we really have to say that this is a challenge, okay? We can overcome this. This is something that will be able to be moved through, that it's not being done to us, okay? We are being challenged by this. Or if you're a supervisor and they're blaming you for something, then you can ask them to look at themselves. That's you having the role of challenger with your employee. And then what we want to get to is that instead of rescuing our employees emotionally and siding with them emotionally and being sympathetic with them, we want to show more empathy, which empathy is when you don't have your emotions change because of someone else's emotions. You're understanding why they feel the way they feel, but you're not tying yourself into their emotionality, okay? And so we want to become more coaches, acknowledging what's going on within that person, but reminding them that they are empowered to have action within the dynamic that's going on around them, that they are a co-creator of their reality. So when we are working with our employees over the next few weeks and months, my guess is we're going to see an increase in that drama triangle. The other thing I want to make sure that everyone understands are the common defense mechanisms that are going to happen to our employees as they want to protect themselves from feeling like something is happening to them, or if you as the leader are having to have more challenging conversations because things need to shift in the company. So if you notice your employees are reacting with these ways, I want you to normalize it with them, but acknowledge it and call it out, call the behavior out so they understand why they're doing what they're doing. So the first is denial. It's a very common defense mechanisms. The next one is indifference, meaning that let's say you're saying to them something needs to improve in your performance. The first with denial might be, no, that's not true. Indifference means I might believe you, but I'm indifferent to it. I don't care about it. I'm not really going to do something. Minimization is that, okay, I hear you, but it's not as bad as you're making it sound. Justification or rationalization is when you are rationalizing, like that employee is rationalizing what you're telling them so that they can minimize the impact of that within their own behavior. And then projection. I love this one. This is when an employee will project onto someone else. It's someone else's fault, or it's something else's fault. It's the virus's fault. It's the government's fault, you know? So projection is when you're taking, you're not owning your behavior and you're projecting it onto someone else. And then the next one is self-pity. So again, a lot of victim mentality mindset might start to shift in. People might demonstrate self-pity kinds of conversations and behaviors. And the last one is strong emotions of either anger or crying. So oftentimes when we are confronting an employee or wanting to have a more challenging conversation with supervisory type things, they get tearful or they get angry. And what do leaders do? They back down because that's uncomfortable for them to have to deal with. So we want to make sure that with our leaders, we're teaching them how to work with employees with some of these different tools so they feel empowered of knowing how to respond, how to normalize it, and hold the employee accountable.
Yeah, just to put this back in context for a lot of our clients out there that we work with on these defense mechanisms quite a bit. Remember, when you're challenging somebody on their behavior, you should fully expect one of these defenses to come back at you. Okay, that is a normal reaction. We're wired to defend ourselves. So what you're trying to do is figure out which mechanism is coming at you, so you know how to help that person out of their defense mode,
Yeah,
okay, and deal with the reality of what you're trying to help them with.
yeah, I love that, David,
What was
because
that?
they're completely normal. And
And I'm
so
sorry.
it's nothing that they can control. They just need to gain awareness of when they're doing it.
Right, right. And then from my awareness, I can actually help them past it. Because usually when somebody gets defensive with us, our first reaction is to get defensive back with them. So, and that just spirals out of control, as most of us know. All right. So let's shift gears a little bit. That's some valuable information on the people side. Kane is going to continue to insert the people stuff as we're going through the execution and the strategy slides. So we've been through the people and the cash slides right now. Now we're going to get into a little bit of the execution. So back to the habit number 1 on the Rockefeller Habit Checklist. The Rockefeller Habit Checklist is inside of the book Scaling Up, written by Vern Harnish. This checklist is very, very useful right now. It's useful in the day-to-day running of your business, and it's very useful in thinking about your business right now. Is the executive team healthy and aligned? I would just take out executive. Is our teams healthy and aligned right now? Think about it. Are they healthy and aligned? Are we understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses? Are we leveraging those? Okay. Habit number 2, is everyone aligned with the number 1 thing that needs to be accomplished this quarter to move the company forward? Having a rally cry right now around one thing is really important. Now, I know some of you had one things that you were working on for the quarter. However, now we're experiencing a little bit of that we're lost, and our one thing is no more relevant. Switch to a new one thing. I may make a one thing that lasts only 1 week right now, because I don't really know what's going to happen next week. As you can see, the last 2 weeks, things shifted so much every day. I may want to make one thing that's for the day. Okay, so you have to think about this habit a little bit differently. But I need all the people inside the organization need that one thing that we're really striving to accomplish. All right. Then the next thing is habit number 3. I know my internet's a little bit unstable, and I know we're approaching the end of the time, but we're going to stay on and continue flowing through this. If you can't stay on with us, that's fine. What we'll do is we'll record this and share it probably tomorrow. We'll have it up on the website so you can actually see it again. Habit number 3, communication rhythm is established and information moves throughout the organization accurately and quickly. How is our communication rhythm right now? Are our meetings still taking place? How are we having them virtually? And we'll be talking a little bit about that in a little while. But I have to keep my meeting cadence up. We're sitting with a client right now. They told us that they stopped all huddles. We agreed stopping all huddles when you're physically meeting. However, we did not agree with stopping with the huddles. Okay, there's phone call-in lines that you can, conference call lines, get those up and going. Conference call lines work very well for huddles. Video does not work well for huddles that last 15 minutes though. So think about that as you're going through. Get your huddles back up. Staying connected will be very valuable to the team as we're going through these times. Number 4, every facet of the organization has a person assigned with accountability for ensuring the goals are met. Again, gets back to the disciplines. Are we holding people accountable to what we're expecting from them while they're at home? I know we're going to have a lot more grace right now because a lot of people are with their kids and some other things. So you have to remember to have grace as you're going through this. And grace is going to be really important, but holding people accountable is going to be important too. So you can't swing one side to the other. You have to have both of them going on. All right. Number 5, ongoing employee input is collected and to identify obstacles and opportunities. Again, I call this is the way we put it. The old Rockefeller habits list called it employee hassles. I still think of it as employee hassles. What's hassling my employees that's stopping them from delivering to my customer? I need to really think about that, and I want my employees to share what those obstacles are. The obstacles are totally different right now for a lot of companies out there. Even companies that are still in operations like the one I'm in right now, it is still more challenging. Right? Number 6, what's hassling my customer? I've changed the way I'm doing business. What's their feedback? How do I keep on improving my systems when we're not physically at our location like we may have been before? Core values and purpose are alive in the organization. I talked about those right at the beginning. Keep them alive. Number 8, can our employees articulate the following components of our strategy? The employees really need to understand these things more now than ever. What is my big hack? Where are we trying to take the company? We can't lose sight of that. We're in the middle of it. We don't know how we're going to get out of the avalanche. We don't know what's going to happen. We're just trying to deal with it, but we're staying focused on where we're going. Who is your core customer? I'll talk a lot about that in a little while. 3 brand promises. What is my brand promise that I'm making to my customer? Do I need to adjust that a little bit? And again, I will talk about that in a little bit. And then the elevator pitch. I don't know how relevant the elevator pitch is right now, but we still need to remember what we do as a company to keep it on the top of our mind. Habit number 9, all employees can answer quantitatively whether they had a good day. And that's column 7 of the one-page strategic plan. And do I have a good day? How do I measure that? And then not subjectively, quantitatively, how do I measure that? What is it that I'm trying to accomplish today? And it may be a day, a week at a time right now. It may not be a quarter. You may need to shorten that time down to just like a day or even a week. The next thing is the company's plan and performance are visible to everyone. How do we keep all the metrics and all the things in front of everyone now that everyone's working a little bit different? Back into our business, maybe 5 months. I don't know how long it's going to be. It may be 3 weeks. We just don't know. So how are we going to make sure everyone can see what we're doing? So now I'm going to talk a little bit about processes, and we want to talk a little bit about waste in this. And we're going to bring one of our team members into the conversation, Cindy. She actually helps a lot of people dealing with process deficiencies. And right now, our processes are all broken. I want you to think about that. Our processes are all broken. What are we going to do? The processes aren't broken because I wanted to break them. The processes are broken because I'm having to shift the way I work. So when we're thinking about it, we want to think a little bit about defects, and then how do I get quality delivered when I have defects into my processes or systems? I want to think a little bit about waiting. Where are we getting stuck in our processes where it's not moving through the system? And then how do I get no delays or get to no delays? Then I want to think a little bit about underutilized talent. Do I have people waiting for the thing before to happen? Are they getting the notifications on time? How are they handling them, making sure that they're utilizing, that people aren't wasting their time just waiting for somebody else? What are they doing when they can't move forward? What else are they doing? How do we have to make sure that we have the right person in the right seat in this case? And then overproduction or inventory control, making sure that we're not buying too many things, but also making sure we're not doing steps that aren't necessary right now. Sometimes some of the steps we may have had before, as far as inventory, the service level that we're doing, maybe we need to cut that down a little bit because we don't have the capacity to actually deliver everything. So we have to think about that. And then excessive movement. Yes, we are moving things around differently in our company. How are we moving that around? And what do we need to do to optimize that process flow? I want to think about these things and have process experts in our company really sit back and think about this. The people that usually own the process should really be thinking about this. And just remember that processes, we have several processes that cut through functional areas. I want you to be conscious about how the processes cut through functional areas when not everyone's in your company working. How is this going to affect another functional area inside of the company if I change something in my functional area? Okay. And then the next one, and I know Cindy's probably dying to jump in here, so I'll have her jump in just a second, is over processing, where I'm not adding value to the system right now. So what do my customers really need is a little bit of a difference, and I really need to think about that. And when I'm thinking about this, I want to think about my core customer, not all the customers, my core customer. That's who I really need to be paying attention to, because I want to deliver value to them. So Cindy, you want to jump in here?
Yes,
and
sir.
I know you wanted to share a few stories about some of the things you've seen out there right now.
Yeah, so I just wanted you to know that I've combined some of these wastes into one story so that we could cover a little bit faster because we're running out of time.
Okay.
One of the things that's typical is when things are good and we're fat, we have a tendency to let some things slide. And when that happens, our processes suffer. Now at a time like this, it puts us in a more precarious position. So we have to start taking a look at where our failures are. The first one, if we can go back to it, is defects. And basically you can find a defect in any stage, in any operation, any company. It could be a system flaw, it could be external, your suppliers are not delivering properly, and human error always factors into it, and that will be greater now than ever. People will make more mistakes. So with the drastic change in our business climate right now, we really have to capture the potential defects and try really hard not to let them out the door. As money gets tight, our customers and consumers are just going to be more fussy about what they get. And if they're not getting what they want, they're going to go somewhere else. So I'm going to just share a little something. A few years ago, Lockheed wrote a new quality objective, and they called it 0 defects. So the whole industry went upside down and thought that was crazy and would never happen. And it was because they misunderstood. Lockheed's not stupid. They only wanted you not to deliver them. Don't deliver your defects. You can have problems. They know you're going to have issues. Just don't bring them to them. So then the other thing I think you need to really pay attention to is setting clear expectations. So many times when we're busy, processes slip through without everyone doing the same job the same way. And as this happens, you get inconsistencies, causes defects. So we want to minimize this and make sure that you have set your expectations and that you're building consistency in the processes. I highly recommend another thing, and that's another set of eyes. We all make mistakes. This will be greater today than it normally is. People will forget what the next step is. They're just going to be off kilter. So someone else should look over their work. Well, the problem here is people are going to be sensitive right now. So if someone else is pointing out their mistakes, they may not like it very much. So we have to encourage them to take a different tack and be able to say, thank you, George. I appreciate you capturing that because now the customer didn't get it. We can fix it before it gets out the door. And they need to take that attitude. It's a helping hand. It serves each other well. So also one other thing to watch for, this happens on a regular basis, but I think in crisis it's going to probably happen more. You'll have employees that want to help. And so they'll take it upon themselves to make a change. They'll think, oh, I could save the company money if we do this. Unfortunately, they're not in a position to have big picture. They don't know the entire process. They may not even know the end use of the products as they go out the door. And in that case, the mistakes that they make can be very costly. And I have an example of a manufacturing plant has an aluminum sheet stock they put through a machine and it's cut into pieces. So one employee says, oh, you know what? If we turn that and cut it on the width, we could actually get 6 more parts out of that. Well, he didn't ask anyone. He didn't get any authority to do it. What happened was that changed the grain of the material. And now they ran 3 full sheets through and all of the parts were scrapped. So you've got to watch that. You've got to make sure people are watching, people are not changing processes on their own. It's critical.
Yeah. And that just goes back hand in hand with what I said earlier, that like if I'm changing a process in one functional area, it may affect somebody else down the road. Changing that grain on that,
yep.
The product may not work the way it was supposed to work because the grain's going in the opposite direction. That's a great story. And Cindy, thank you for jumping on and sharing some of this with us. Cindy is available to help with some of this if you need to think about your processes and need a little bit of help even get started cleaning up or developing some of the new processes for this new way we're working. So want to get into a little bit about tips for managing a virtual workforce. So how we're looking at it is we're looking at 5 different areas: communication, accountability, technology, collaboration, and culture. So we've talked a lot about all these already, but I want to sort of sum them up in this new virtual environment. So having daily huddles, weekly meetings, monthly meetings, quarterly meetings, keeping up your one-to-one coaching, customer hassles, employee hassles, newsletter, videos. I know the group I'm with right now, they do a video once a week, going out to all their team members. They're actually going to do it once a day or have some daily communication with their teams, just to follow a little bit about what, like Vern said, communicate daily. That was one of his things, top 5 things that he said that everybody needs to be doing. And I think that he's right. We got to be communicating. I may communicate several times in one day.
Hey, David.
Accountability. Roll down. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I just want to remind everybody that the standard emergency response includes 3 things, and it highlights communication. So you have to validate employee concerns, which is what we've already been discussing about. You have to show action. And the third is you have to control the narrative. And controlling the narrative is vital. So this communication piece is super important during times of crisis, because if you don't tell your managers what to say for the frequently asked questions the employees have during a state of crisis, the employee will make up their own story, or the manager will make up their own story. So it's really important with this communication slide that you remember, in a crisis, it's leaders' job to control the narrative, and that includes the internal narrative as well as the external narrative. Thanks, David.
Thank you for throwing that in, because it really is important. Vern talked quite a bit about it to us coaches the other day, about making sure that we're having our clients work on this. And so very, very important overall. Accountability. We have to get role definitions down again. Who are the roles? Again, getting the face sheet out and really understanding who fills in for somebody in case they're not there. We should do this all the way down through the company, though. We should have each team leader start to identify who is the person going to be that's going to help if I'm out. Accountability overall, responsibility, accountability. The one person who's giving voice. Responsibility, somebody who's actually taking action. Authority, the person who's making the decision. KPIs, how do we keep KPIs in front of people so they know what's going on and they know what the metrics are? The KPIs aren't looking very good right now. How do we get new measurements or new outcomes that we're trying to get from the KPIs? The 13-week race, now I may make it a 13-day race. I may make it a 13-hour race. You want to sort of think about this a little bit differently. The next thing is quarterly priorities, SMART goals, the WWW. Use the WWW just as you would. The who, what, and when is really, really important right now to make sure that things are getting done and people are being held accountable. The boundaries and expectations of accountability. What are those boundaries? What is everybody expecting? expected to do? What time are you expecting everybody to be online? What time are you expecting them to work? Is your server back at the office getting bottlenecked? All these things we need to think about as far as boundaries, processes and procedures, which we just talked about. Technology, internal social media, project management, teleconferencing, filing systems, software and hardware. In the software and hardware section, do your employees have enough internet speed? Do I need to pay for that so they can have the internet speed? Am I getting mad because they don't have the internet speed? Well, we didn't pay their bill before. We may need to have them increase it and pay the difference so that they can actually get what we need from them. And then automation. I want to think about use policy, security as some of the technology pieces. These are all just pretty normal, but what is it in our new environment? That's how I need to think about it. I need to collaborate more. Video versus phone. Phone is great for really quick conversations, but video is a lot better. If I'm going to be on there an hour or talking to somebody of an hour, it helps me see their body language. It helps me feel like I'm really there in front of them. We communicate mostly with body language and inflection in our voice. Our actual words usually aren't the communication that everybody's actually receiving. So video really helps with that. Social outlets, how are they getting outlets? Are we still getting with some of the people at work and having little chat sessions with them and just having a good time every once in a while? Allow this stuff to happen, especially right now. I mean, the other day or today we were in there and we just started joking around. It was probably 10 minutes. We were just joking around. We needed that. We had been dealing with a lot of really challenging things and we needed just to joke around a little bit. Allow those things to happen. Avoid local versus remote mindset. You know, you're not here, so you don't understand. People that are remote are still in that state. Kane, did you have something specific you wanted to share?
Yeah, because as a virtual team, it's very easy to begin to feel isolated from where you used to work or feel isolated from the home office. So it's really important to make sure that you're transitioning some of the team dynamics and the collaboration and the team relationships into not having separate. Remote people are different than people who are still might be coming into the office. So we want to make sure we're still inclusive of the new group.
Yeah. What are the new shifts? We had a client talk to us the other day about manufacturing. They were having trouble keeping the social distancing. And what we suggested them is start 2 shifts and separate the people as much as you can. We understand that's not an optimal situation. We're not in an optimal situation right now, but we have to sort of deal with what we have. Shared calendars, cross coverage, peer buddies that are able to fill in and take over if I'm not around. The culture, virtual core values, what are they going to be? I would actually set core values and rules for how we need to conduct ourselves at the video conferencing. Like, what are we wearing? How are we showing up? Are we showing up like we rolled out of bed? Are we showing up professionally dressed? Remember, your customers are seeing you still, and you have to remember that they're getting an impression when you're actually doing this. And Kane, you had a little bit about this. We were talking yesterday about this, a few more insights here.
Yeah, because I was just talking to an executive the other day who was sharing that their team is not used to working remotely. And so I asked them, have you set the expectations for keeping your brand when your employees are working from their home environment? What's their background? What are the noises around them? What are they wearing? Are they doing the face-to-face instead of just using phone, which is more comfortable than having to see someone face-to-face? So we have to make sure that we are setting the expectations. Again, we are controlling the narrative and the expectation to our employees so that we are controlling our brand to the client.
Yeah, and Cindy just chimed in on text to me and just said, hey, remind everyone to have a contingency for internet interruptions. Thank you, Cindy, for that. That's really valuable for people to think about. So you want to think about all of these things as you're going along. All right, then let's get into the last section, which is strategy. Okay, so when you're thinking about your strategy, right now it's really hard to think about strategy, but you have to keep your strategy in mind, even in the middle of chaos. You have to keep your strategy in mind. Don't lose the focus on the long-term vision that you have for the company and just throw it all away right now. I wouldn't throw it away. I want to keep my vision on it. I may need to do things that takes me further off path, but I want to make sure we're keeping focus on it. So we're deeply passionate about what drives your economic engine and what you can be in the best of the world at. Your hedgehog lives in that center. What is my hedgehog? What is the one thing that we know that we're going to do really well and continue to do really well? And let's focus on delivering that one thing really well. And so I wanted to just remind you that strategy still plays a really critical role in what we're doing right now. Don't lose sight of your strategy. The next thing is, do not lose sight of your core customer. I'm talking to so many people when I bring up the core customer that are like, oh my goodness, thank you for even saying that. I have to keep in mind that it's a real individual with unique identity and needs. And again, this comes inside of the book, Inside Advantage by Bob Bloom. I can develop my core customer, but my core customer is who I'm really providing services to right now. As I start needing to cut back because I just can't deliver at the same rate I was before, I want to really get my core customer down and really understand who they are so I can make sure that I'm delivering to my core first and foremost. All right. So this is what my customer sees up here in the top of the iceberg, not pyramid, iceberg. And this is what it takes to deliver. We still have all this weight underneath that we still have to deal with, but all this stuff is shifting. So our customers are going to see things we don't really want them to see. Take a look at your brand promise. Can you still deliver your brand promise right now? You may need to forego your brand promise right now just because I cannot deliver it. So take a look at it. Is it real? Can we deliver it? And then just think about the brand promise. I wanted to bring catalytic mechanisms into play, and that was an article that was written by Jim Collins back in 1996, and you can get it out of the Harvard Business Review. And it really talks about brand promise and what I'm trying to guarantee and what I'm trying to do. Just remember, a guarantee galvanizes us and gets rid of the bureaucracy, and it creates discomfort for subpar results in us. So if we're going to have a brand promise and we can only deliver subpar results right now, should we really be offering our brand promise? And again, I'm not telling you to throw out your brand promise. I'm trying to get you to think about how I'm keeping it and how I'm still delivering it, not to just go and throw it away because we can't deliver right now. What can I do to still deliver that? All right. Next thing is I want to think a little bit about my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I want to think about my strengths and weaknesses are internal and I have control. Okay. And strengths are helpful. Weaknesses are harmful. I don't have a lot of control in opportunities and threats right now. Control what you can. My weaknesses in SWOT are things I'm probably fixing. Maybe I forego some of those things right now. Maybe I need to focus in on my strengths. Then I go over to SWET, strengths, weaknesses, and trends. Strengths and weaknesses here are a little bit different. What are my inherent sources of strength? Am I still nurturing those in my company? Am I still making sure that those strengths stay alive so I can still deliver them? What are my weaknesses? Don't fall into your weaknesses right now. This is the real challenge in this time. It's really easy for me to go from my strengths to my weaknesses very quickly. And so I just, and as I explain it to a lot of the clients out there, which a lot of you still are on, our clients, there's just a thread that's separating the two. I can flip over to my weaknesses very quickly. I don't want to be over in my weaknesses. I want to stay in my strengths. All right. So what does the human brain look like when I'm solving a problem by myself? This is an infrared camera. The brain is cool. It's not very engaged. What does it look like when I'm doing this in a group activity? My brain heats up. I'm getting more activity. Better ideas come out. How do we keep that human interaction going when we have to separate ourselves from each other? I really need to think about that, and am I using the right tools that'll help me? The keys to success are core values and purpose, keeping them in front of everybody and using them in every decision we make. Meeting rhythms and communication, accountability, responsibility, and authority, and defining those really well. The Rockefeller Habits Checklist, get it out, take a look at it, see if what we're doing relating to that. Knowing my core customer and realizing in the end of this crisis, I may be only delivering to my core. That may be the only customer I can actually deliver to at the time. Okay, so again, I want to make sure you understand these 3 words that you have to understand. They're on page 42 of the Scaling Up book. I know the page by heart because I have my clients read this over and over and over again. Accountability, responsibility, and authority. Everything we're delegating right now, who has accountability, who has responsibility, who has authority, we want to clearly define these things. So, question and answers, I guess we'll open it up. Kane, do we have any questions right now? I know we have quite a few people still on, surprisingly, even though we're a little late on this.
Yeah, so if there's any attendee that would like to ask a question, if you move your mouse to the bottom of your Zoom, you'll have a Q&A icon and you can ask a question and we're happy to stay on and answer them for you. The other thing that I would like to just point out while we're getting any potential questions is that right now you might really have to look at the authority, and in a time of expediting process in order to take advantage of limited resources or needing to respond quickly, you might need to think about, do I have to loosen up authority or tighten up authority in your different processes? Don't assume that in a state of crisis you need to gain more control. Sometimes you need to have an employee be able to make a decision to actively purchase a limited resource without having to get normal approvals, or vice versa, take away privileges or authority you've given in the past and tighten it up on an executive team to be making some decisions they normally would not make. So I want to make sure that as you're thinking about your leadership and the normal types of people who are responsible for actions, accountable for bringing voice to actions, as well as authority to make decisions, you're looking at it from a state of the current situation that we're in. You might have to have short-term adjustments.
Okay, Kane, we have a question here. So they just want to know a little bit about how to get a free disc and what that entails. So it's up here on the screen of how to get a free disc. And what that entails is that allows you as an individual to get a free disc, and then we'll schedule a time to do a debriefing with you, because we have to do a debriefing every time we do one of these things. It takes us about a half hour to an hour to debrief you, but it'll give you some insight. If you would like one to do it with your whole team, we'll be happy to help you with that also. You can just reach out to us, but I suggest that you start with the free disc first. So they ask, how do I get it for my team? Do your own free disc, let us debrief you, and then we can have a conversation about your team. We have several coaches available. Almost all of our coaches are certified to deliver these discs in our firm. And so take advantage of that first. Any other questions out there, Kane?
Yeah, there's a question about if they want to talk privately, how can they do that?
Okay. So do you want to cover that a little bit?
Yeah, so basically, if you would like to talk to one of us privately about your specific circumstance, you can email us at info@assuredstrategy.com, and we'll be happy to schedule a time with you, because we know that sometimes the general conversation, it's easier for you to talk about your specific example or your specific dynamic within the content that we discussed. So absolutely, that's not a problem. Just email us and we'll get you to the right coach for the kind of problem that you're wanting to talk about. So in your email to us, just say a little bit about what you would like to ask.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to cut this off because we're quite a bit over time, and our emails are up on the screen. And I want to thank everybody who came today, and hopefully we got you some good information. I know we didn't answer several questions, so just go ahead and email us, and we'll be happy to answer these questions offline individually with you. I'm not sure whether it'll keep the questions or not for us, Kane, so we can follow up with everybody. So go ahead and email us if you have a question, and we'll be happy to help you. I hope this really has provided some insight for you. We didn't cover anything about the coronavirus just because we thought there was enough information out there. We just wanted to cover of how do we deal with our businesses right now more than anything else. Thank you very much. Kane, would you like to say goodbye to everybody?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. We're here to support.
Bye.
Thank you.